Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to look at another horrific case with you. A lethal love triangle. When a person falls in love, they frequently become softer, more susceptible, and inclined to idealize the object of their devotion. In this state, it is difficult to evaluate the beloved's attributes critically. Any negative on their part is immediately rationalized, and obvious faults or unusual actions are simply dismissed. Overwhelmed by emotions, we often overlook our loved one's flaws. However, if those sentiments are not reciprocated and the loved one is capable of deception or criminal behavior, the lover may find themselves in grave peril. Several years ago, the story of a young man named Diogo Goncalves shocked all of Portugal with its cruelty and cold-bloodedness, with two young, fragile-looking girls with angelic appearances serving as the ruthless perpetrators. The slaying kid and his executioners were involved in a love triangle, but don't rush to blame Diogo. He was not romantically connected with the two girls, but rather fell prey to the intrigues and greed of his lovely colleague, whom he loved unrequitedly, and her lover. Now, let's take a close look at this complex case from the start to see how quiet and modest beauties turned into cruel criminals, robbers, and carjackers, why the victim's body was discovered in pieces in various locations, and how a serious and prudent young man failed to realize he had been duped into a deadly trap. Diogo Goncalves was born on July 17, 1999, in Albufeira, a charming vacation town in southern Portugal. He was the lone child in a basic, impoverished family. His parents had a tiny souvenir shop, thus their income was completely related to the season and the quantity of tourists who visited the town. Diogo grew up modest, polite, and pleasant. He excelled in school, had an early interest in computers, and aspired to a career in programming. People described him as an outgoing, gregarious young man who had many friends both within and outside of school. He dreaded being alone, so he was always seeking the companionship of family or friends. After graduating school, the young man enrolled in a computer academy, but because the education was rather expensive, he also worked part-time at a fast food restaurant to support his parents and partially fund his study. Diogo had already established himself as a hardworking and dependable employee who could be counted on in all situations. In early 2017, tragedy hit the Goncalves family. The family patriarch suffered a catastrophic stroke, leaving him teetering on the edge of death for several weeks. When his condition stabilized, the individual was disabled for an extended period of time and required constant medical attention. However, misfortune does not strike alone. While the father fought for his life, his wife was hit by a car on her way to the hospital. The event occurred unexpectedly at a pedestrian crossing. As the woman approached the middle of the road, a car arrived out of nowhere at tremendous speed, pushing her into the air and rushed away without even braking. The hit was so powerful that the sufferer was thrown a dozen meters, had an open skull injury, and had no hope of surviving. Medics came in minutes but could only pronounce her dead. The motorist responsible for the deadly collision was apprehended the next day, but despite clear evidence of his guilt, a lengthy and complicated court struggle ensued since the man had engaged a good attorney. The unfortunate Diogo, who was not yet 18, was utterly alone. At that point, his aunt, his father's sister, arrived in Albufeira and offered to be the teenager's guardian as well as care for her ailing brother. However, the aunt's connection with her nephew was far from ideal. The authoritarian mother imposed her regulations, which the young guy despised, and as soon as he reached adulthood, he relocated to a leased apartment. Unrequited love in 2018, a young software specialist interned at the region's leading tourist spa. His skills and abilities were highly valued by management, and he was offered a permanent position with a steady salary. Furthermore, the outgoing, open, and friendly young man rapidly assimilated into the team and made friends with his co-workers. Diogo handled his work well and was always willing to assist others. This spa center employed a lovely young woman named Maria Malvaro, to whom the new specialist formed romantic sentiments. He began courting her cautiously, but the colleague largely disregarded his advances. Nonetheless, she interacted with him freely, received gifts, and declined any date invites or quickly shifted the subject. Diogo inadvertently fell passionately in love with this small, dark-haired beauty who worked as a security guard in an unusual position. Maria mixed strength and femininity. She was approachable but unattainable, and the young man was unable to resist her. This was his first true love, and it proved to be faithful for him. Maria, the difficult Maria Malvaro, a year Diogo's senior, was likewise an Albufera native from a low-income family. She never met her biological father because he abandoned her when she was very young and has since shown no interest in her fate or offered financial assistance. Maria was reared by her mother and grandmother. However, her grandmother died a few years ago, and her mother was diagnosed with a severe mental disease and admitted to a specialist clinic. Maria realized from a young age that she could only rely on herself, so she worked hard to succeed in life. She was heavily active in athletics since school, was strong and physically developed, and maintained a delicate and graceful appearance. In high school, she began jiu-jitsu and eventually got a blue belt. Malvaro aspired to be a law enforcement officer, but due to her mother's mental illness, she was denied entry to the police academy, which devastated her. Instead, she received specialized training to become a professional security officer and was hired by the spa center's security team. Maria's and care for her ailing mother, whose health was worsening. Nonetheless, the young woman was not discouraged. She stayed positive about the future and was pleasant and nice to all around her. However, the enamored Diogo mistook her courtesy for mutual interest. He even turned down a lucrative job offer in the capital because he wanted to capture Maria's heart and didn't want to be separated from her. The young man spent a third of his earnings on his loved one, buying her gifts and taking her to restaurants and amusement parks. They quickly appeared to be a happy couple, but Maria never kissed him. However, it turned out that her restraint was not the result of extreme modesty or shyness. Diogo came across a small video on social media showing his beloved hugging and kissing another girl. It turned out she had been in a love connection with Mariana Finesco, 23, for more than a year. Diogo, devastated, approached Maria, asking why she had not been open with him, to which she replied that she liked to keep her personal life private. Despite this news, Gonzalez continued his courtship, never losing hope that she might one day return his love. Mariana Finesco hailed from a low-income family and received little financial support. She graduated from a nursing school and worked as a basic nurse at a nearby hospital. She and Maria had hoped to rent a home together, but their low wages and the necessity to support their families made that impossible. When Diogo took Maria to supper at a restaurant in January 2020, he explained that the court case against the driver who killed his mother had recently completed. The driver was found guilty and compelled to pay a significant compensation of 100,000 euros, which was transferred to Diogo's account the same day. Diogo spoke about it dispassionately, even with sadness, because no amount of money could bring back his dearest friend, and he missed Maria's eyes light up when she heard the news. Diogo's relationship took an unforeseen turn after that. Maria developed an interest in him and even affectionately held his hand during walks, which she had never done before. Goncalves couldn't believe his luck, feeling as if his innermost desire was coming true. But he didn't think about why this was happening or what was causing such abrupt and extreme shifts in Maria's conduct. He just savored the times, assuming Maria's love for him were genuine. In truth, as soon as Malvaro learned about the money Diogo had received, she informed Finesco, and they began preparing how to seize the monies. Initially, they sought to convince Diogo that Maria had finally noticed him as a man and reciprocated his feelings. The women then planned to take the money from the young man through deception or force and flee to another country where they could begin a new life with the stolen monies. A beautiful evening develops into a violent encounter. Maria abruptly approached Diogo and offered they spend a romantic evening together. She stated that their relationship could take a new turn, that they could become a couple, and that anything might happen between them. Diogo was in a good mood at the time, so the girl's rapid shifts in conduct did not bother him. He believed in her genuine feelings. The long-awaited encounter was scheduled for the evening of Friday, March 20, 2020, in Diogo's rented flat. The young man made dinner, set a table for two, purchased flowers, and a small gift for his loved one. Maria came at approximately 8 p.m. They sat down at the table, and she poured a fresh fruit she had brought, asking Diogo to drink it all in order to fully appreciate the flavor of the cocktail she had prepared. Without hesitation, he did so, ignorant that the juice included a high dose of a powerful sedative taken from Mariana's employer. Diogo soon felt ill. His head spun, everything before his eyes blurred, and he fell asleep. He recognized something was wrong and grew very worried, reaching for his phone, but Maria stole it from his grasp, claiming she wanted to perform an erotic dance for him. She turned on the music and began gently undressing, and the young man appeared to relax a bit. She then tied him to a chair and presented it as part of the game. Diogo panicked and attempted to free himself, but fell to the floor with the chair. When he noticed Maria simply watching the events develop, he began to yell and plead for aid, thinking that the neighbors would hear him. She then squeezed on his neck, causing the young man to lose consciousness. She then contacted Mariana, who was parked close and waited for a signal. When Finesco entered the apartment, she noticed Diogo laying on the floor and inquired about what had happened. Maria stated that the medicine dosage had probably been too low, causing Diogo to fear and shout rather than fall asleep. The girls discovered he wasn't breathing and decided to untie him, and Mariana used her talents to start Kiar. When Diogo regained consciousness, he screamed, tried to resist, and fled the apartment, but Maria, using her martial arts talents, knocked him down and applied a chokehold. A few minutes later, Gonçalves showed no indications of life, and his friends did not try to revive him further. The imperfect crime using fingerprints and facial recognition, the girls were able to open the deceased young man's phone and access his banking app. They transferred all of his available funds to Maria's account and then discussed how to dispose of the body in order to delay its discovery as long as possible. Knowing that Gonçalves was scheduled to work the next day, Malvero decided to send a message from his phone to his supervisor, seeking time off due to unexpected family concerns. This message startled his manager because during his tenure, the programmer had never requested time off, been late, or swapped shifts. The employer attempted to call the employee to find out what was going on, but all calls were denied, followed by a voicemail from Diogo indicating he couldn't speak right now. On Saturday, still unsure what to do with the body, the perpetrators visited a huge shopping mall and spent some of the money they had stolen from the victim. Surveillance camera footage captured them acting casually, buying purchases, eating at the food court, and smiling while chatting. They didn't appear tense and plainly assumed they could avoid accountability. When the pals returned to the flat, they decided to sever Diogo's thumb so that they could unlock his phone and send messages on his behalf. At that point, they determined that dismembering the body and scattering it in numerous locations would be the best course of action. Portraying the young man's disappearance as if he had committed suicide, they purchased plastic wrap in large trash bags, then used a kitchen cleaver and knives to separate the limbs and head from torso. Mariana's expertise of human anatomy was extremely valuable during this arduous task. The guys then put all of the parts into 4 bags and transported them out of the apartment. Late at night, loading them into Diogo's car trunk, Maria drove her deceased admirer's car while her accomplice followed in her own vehicle. They drove out of town to a cliff, tossed the bag carrying the torso down the edge, and left the car near the cliff to make it appear that the young man had jumped. However, they failed to observe that the body did not sink, but rather became lodged in a crack at the cliff's foot. They then drove a few miles to a wooded slope where they threw out the victim's head and dropped his limbs into a little waterfall. Body parts on the coast that Saturday. The spa center's administration reported the employee's disappearance to the authorities, citing the weird text received from his phone number. However, the search for the young man did not begin until Sunday, a full day after his absence was reported. The first finding was his automobile on the cliff's edge, and it was initially assumed that he had committed himself. However, just a few hours later, authorities discovered a torso in a bag in the crevice below, which was quickly proved to be Gonçalves through forensic analysis. The same day, a group of visitors informed the authorities that they had discovered a shredded bag containing a human head. The limbs were discovered some days later, following exhaustive searches by divers. The crime scene was horrific, but according to the deceased's colleagues and friends, he had no enemies, was kind, Hearted, never broke the law, and did not associate with people who had criminal records or were linked to criminal records or were linked to criminal activities, but who could have brutally murdered such a quiet and friendly young man. The inquiry, arrest, and initial court ruling. During the early phases of the investigation, it was learned that the young man had recently received a large sum of money in his account as compensation for a court ruling. However, it was discovered that the money had inexplicably been transferred to Diogo's co-worker, Maria. She was quizzed as she and Mariana were ready to depart the country via the airport. Malvero was taken off guard. She had not expected the cops to track them down in just a few days. She confessed right away, alleging that she committed the crime because her colleague pursued her and attempted to compel her in intimacy. She also claimed that she planned and carried out the crime alone, with no cooperation from her companion. Nonetheless, both women were detained and escorted to the police to provide statements. Maria stated that she accidentally strangled the young man after he attempted to compel her into intimacy. However, Diogo's co-workers insisted that he would never treat a lady he liked in such a way, a feeling backed by communication between the victim and the accused. Furthermore, a significant percentage of a powerful sedative detected in the victim's blood indicated that he was unconscious at the time of death. Maria then attempted to assume full responsibility, alleging that she had committed the crime for money. She claimed Mariana was uninformed, and when the tragedy occurred, she attempted CPR on the young man. Mariana, on the other hand, said that they planned the heist jointly, expecting just to transfer the funds to their account and depart, but that things did not proceed as planned. There was no doubt about the women's guilt, but identifying their specific involvement in the crime was difficult. Both asked to be placed in the same jail during the investigation so that they could see each other, but despite their demands, they were placed in separate detention facilities with no communication or contact. The trial started in July 2020. Despite Malvero's repeated claims of sole culpability, investigators questioned her ability to dismember a body without anatomical understanding. The investigation was given 6 months to gather all pertinent facts, evidence, and testimony. Throughout this time, the suspects had no touch with one another, and the investigation took an unexpected direction. When Maria claimed full responsibility again at a hearing in February 2021, Mariana just reiterated her testimony, stating she had no participation in the murder or heist. Maria's lover's behavior appeared to upset her, and a month later, Malvero raised her original testimony. She now stated that she acted at the direction of Mariana, the crime's mastermind, and that her buddy dismembered the body because she knew how to do it best. Maria went on to say that she originally took the responsibility to protect her loved one, but then realized that her companion had never genuinely loved her. Despite Malvero's amended testimony, the court convicted her of premeditated murder, corpse mutilation, robbery, and carjacking in April 2021. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Mariana, an accomplice, received a 4-year sentence but was released on parole after less than a year. The court found her attempts to perform SPR demonstrated that she did not want to end his life and wished to assist. A new trial and an unexpected twist after being released. Mariana Finesco consented to give an interview to a local television station, which proved to be a fatal error. During the interview, she blamed everything on her already incarcerated companion, while laughing and looked very self-satisfied. Shortly after the video went viral, a well-known psychologist examined it, describing how gestures, facial expressions, and body language might suggest deceit. He speculated that Mariana was enjoying in her impunity and sense of superiority, implying that she was a skilled manipulator, capable of passing all guilt to someone else. A month after her release, Finesco filed a lawsuit against the hospital where she had previously worked, saying she had been unlawfully sacked and demanding a large sum as moral compensation. Surprisingly, the court sided with her, ordering the hospital's management to reinstate her and pay the compensation she sought. Mariana seemed to be doing incredibly well. She was free, back at work, and had received year 40,000 as moral recompense. However, news quickly spread from the prison that Maria had committed suicide by hanging herself with a bedsheet in her cell. She left a note explaining aspects of Diogo's actions that implicated her companion. Following this occurrence, the case was reopened, and the victim's father filed an appeal, claiming that Vanesco was equally guilty as her accomplice. The Supreme Court issued its final ruling in June 2023, finding Mariana guilty of plotting and carrying out Gonçalves' murder, as well as dismembering his body and carjacking. Finally, she was condemned to 25 years in prison with no option of early release. Since then, she and her lawyer have filed appeals thrice, but all of them have been denied. Thank you for viewing, people. Please subscribe to my channel. There are many frightening stories ahead of you.